Hello, my name is Mark Saunders, and this video presentation on YouTube is about philosophical beliefs and assumptions in business and management research. There are other video presentations on YouTube on my YouTube channel, Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and the link to this is on the left-hand side of the slide. Finally, and crucially, many of the ideas in this video presentation have been jointly developed with my good friend Alexandra Bristow. So thank you very much, Alex. In this video presentation, we're going to start by looking at what is philosophy. Moving on, we're then going to think about your philosophical beliefs and assumptions as a reflexive process. By reflexivity, we mean examining yourself, evaluating and interpreting your attitudes and beliefs in relation to the data and your research findings. And alongside this, interactions you will have with those who take part in your research and the way these may affect the processes and outcomes of your research. We're then going to move into more detail, looking at different aspects of philosophical beliefs and assumptions. We're going to look at ontology, epistemology, and axiology. And we're going to finish by looking at the implications of these again for your research as a series of questions. So today we're very much looking at the outer layer of the research onion. So let's start with what is research philosophy. It's about your beliefs and assumptions about three things: the nature of reality, which we call ontology; your beliefs and assumptions about knowledge, what makes good knowledge, what makes acceptable knowledge, and so on, and we call this epistemology; and finally, the role of your values, we call this axiology. You have a research philosophy already, but are you aware of your beliefs and assumptions? And when you look at the project you're doing, do they actually fit with the way you're collecting and analysing data? Remember, everyone has beliefs and assumptions, whether or not they are aware of them. But not everyone has actually put them together and thought how they impact on their research project. And that's what we're going to be looking at now. So let's start by thinking about your philosophical beliefs and assumptions as a reflexive process. Remember, reflexive means self-examining, evaluating and interpreting your attitudes, beliefs in relation to the data and findings you will have from these. So if we look on here, we all have beliefs and assumptions, and as we can see in the diagram, these affect our choice of research philosophies. Now, this video is not about actual philosophies, it's about the facts behind them. So I will not be talking about 5 major research philosophies commonly used in business and management research. That's the subject of a separate YouTube video presentation. But what we can see here, which is really clear, is your beliefs and assumptions affect your research philosophies, but they also affect your research design. That's the way you put your research together. And what we're trying to do here is to make sure everything fits together, so we have a coherent piece of research which will enable you to answer your research questions. The first aspect of research philosophy we're going to consider is ontological beliefs and assumptions. These are beliefs and assumptions about the world and the nature of reality or being. So, do you see reality as one definite, or are there multiple realities? Your beliefs and assumptions about this determine how you will see your research objectives. For example, if you were researching resistance to change in an organisation, would you see employees' resistance as damaging organisations by creating problems for them? Or alternatively, would you see employees' resistance to change as being of a benefit to organisations, because it would force problems to come out into the open and then to be addressed? So, in terms of your ontological beliefs and assumptions, you're asking yourself, what are your assumptions about the reality of what you are researching? So in effect, you're saying, what theoretical frameworks are you going to choose? What sorts of data were you going to look for and collect? And what is your focus for your analysis? The next aspect of philosophy we're going to consider is epistemological beliefs and assumptions. These are about what counts as valid, legitimate and acceptable knowledge by yourself and also by those for whom you're undertaking the research. This will determine the kinds of data you collect. For example, you're going to use numbers or words or pictures or a combination, and how you communicate your findings both in terms of your report, perhaps to an organisation, but also in terms of a dissertation or a project report. So, for example, do you consider that measurable facts count as valid, legitimate and acceptable knowledge? Or alternatively, are stories and narratives legitimate and valid? Or it may be that both are, and this is not only from your perspective, but also from the perspective of those who are reading your work. You therefore need to ask yourself what constitutes legitimate and acceptable knowledge and good quality data for your research. The final part of philosophical beliefs and assumptions we're going to consider are axiological beliefs and assumptions. These are concerned with the role of values and ethics in research process, so your values and your ethical views. And these will determine how personally involved you become in the research process. For example, we look at companies, and in many countries, companies pay the legal minimum tax requirement. But is that fair? And so, depending on your values, you may be thinking they should pay a fair amount of tax rather than just the legal requirement. Another example of this is in terms of whose responsibility is career development. Is it the employees or is it the organisations? Again, this depends on your values. For organisational information, should it be freely available, or is it up to the organisation to give the minimum the law requires? So here, I'd like you to ask yourself, what is the role of your values in your research? Do they impact on what you want to research? And when undertaking your research, should you be morally neutral? So, from going through ontology, epistemology and axiology, these have a number of implications for your research philosophy. So, with ontology, what are your beliefs and assumptions about the reality of what you're researching? Is there only one right view out there, or are there multiple views out there competing in terms of the reality of what's happening? When we look at epistemology, what constitutes legitimate and acceptable knowledge for your research? Is it qualitative data, people's views and opinions, the stories they tell, photographs, pictures, illustrations? Or is it numerical data, counts, the proportions of people that do things, statistical relationships? And this depends not only on you, but also on who you're undertaking the research for. And these lead to, very clearly, what constitutes good quality data. Is it data which is quantitative, rigorously collected and statistically analysed, or is it data perhaps which is qualitative, where you've spent a lot of time undertaking in-depth interviews and getting to know your participant well? And finally, the role of axiology, the role of your values in research. Do you believe that your research must be doing something which is important, perhaps to make a change to improve people's lives? Or do you think you should be morally neutral in your research? When you start to build the answers to these questions, you start to then understand what your research philosophy is. So to summarise, let's return to the research onion. And just to point out, the research onion does not show all research philosophies used in business and management. Rather, it shows 5 frequently used philosophies. So you will not see research philosophies such as feminism shown on the onion. I'd like to leave you with a number of thoughts, and these go back to the components of your research philosophy. And it's made up of your ontological beliefs. These are assumptions about reality. Your epistemological beliefs, assumptions about knowledge, and finally your axiological beliefs, assumptions about the impact of your own values and beliefs. All these can be diagnosed using the tool HARP, developed by myself and Alexander Bristow. HARP stands for Heightening Awareness of Research Philosophies, and it's available to download on Chapter 4 of the Research Methods book, Research Methods of Business Students, and that is listed in the references, which I will now move on to. In terms of readings, I've put 3 separate readings here, all of which provide useful insights into philosophical assumptions and beliefs. These are Mark Easterby Smith's and colleagues' book, Gill and Johnson's book, Research Methods for Managers, and finally, Research Methods for Business Students, my own book written with Phil and Adrian. And here I put the link to the actual chapter, which you can download from 3 with compliments of Pearson.